This is Crying in the Trashcan, and today we have our special guest, Jinny. Jinny is a friend of mine from high school, one of the smartest people that I know, and she also thinks that the economy is going to collapse at any second. Jinny, to start off, why don't you start explaining, so what do you think, why do you think the economy is about to collapse?
Yeah, of course. That was a great introduction, and thank you guys so much for having me. This is so much fun. I'm so proud of you. This is fantastic.
Thanks.
Okay, so I think we're about. I don't think, given all of the traditional predictors are sounding off right now of a impending housing and economic collapse. I think we're going to see the mother of all busts in probably the coming month or so at the most. I guess we can start just diving in a little bit into the timeline of the different indicators that are predicting this. So,
Okay.
moving back time a little bit to February, so just about a month or so ago, Janet Yellen, who's now she's in charge of the Department of Treasury now. She was over for many years at the IMF. She printed $1.1 trillion. And I'm talking about all of this. Oh, and she got a lot of flack because she went out there and said that they're printing 1,100 billion dollars instead of saying a trillion. She got a lot of heat for that one, which was pretty funny. So
Yeah.
I say that was as background information because it leads us to what's been going on this past week, which has been very extreme. M1 and M2 on Fed, which is the Federal Reserve
Yeah.
economic base, has now been discontinued. Now they're still publishing monthly, but they're not doing the weekly reports anymore. And when you look at the graphs, and I guess you can insert them here, you see the lines going vertical, which
Okay.
is pretty extreme. And also the fact that they're now hiding this information is putting a lot of people on edge, especially given since in 2007 they stopped publishing M3. So this is very reminiscent of past behavior from the Federal Reserve.
Now, is there any way that you can go ahead and sort of explain to us what the like M1, M2, and M3 are, just for people who don't know?
Yeah, of course. So I
Me?
guess go one more over. So we'll start with M1. M1 is all money in circulation, and M2 is all money in circulation, including CDs, what's in your savings account. So it's
Okay.
liquidatable cash in the economy. And oh, is that not a very good screenshot of M1?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'll try to keep it really quickly for you. Okay, go back over to M2. M2
Yeah.
is M1 is really disconcerting because it's vertical, but M2, as you can see, has been a huge, huge increase, and that vertical jump right there at the end is really what I'm pointing at. This you can see where I'm pointing to.
Yeah.
M2, just to keep it nice and simple for everyone, M2 is the predictor of inflation. When M2 rises, you're going to see inflation. So let's take that and segue into a little bit of background on what is inflation.
Right.
Inflation is, I guess the easy way to think about it is our grandparents' generation could afford, on one salary, on like usually typically the husband's salary, a family of 3, 4 people, and they were able to have all their basic necessities. As a lot of millennials like us or Gen Zers are experiencing, we can afford anything.
Right.
A lot of people are barely making ends meet, and there's a lot of factors at play. Of course, there's huge debt, but also there's inflation. Inflation is when you start printing a currency. We work off of fiat currency, so it's basically just backed off of the faith in the U.S. government, its ability to pay it back. And you can think of inflation as a tax, and they always talk about it as being wanting it to ideally be around 2%. Jerome Powell, everyone always talks about this like magic 2% number. And why you can think of it as a tax is as they print more money, it's easier for them to pay back government debts if money is worth less. They can just print more. This has a negative effect on our standard of living because, of course, then you can afford less and less and less. The fact that they're now hiding M1 and M2 is hugely indicative of the fact that we're about to experience huge jumps in inflation, and that would be, it would be catastrophic for
Right.
everyday Americans. I want to pause there. Is there any questions before I? Keep going.
Yeah, so okay, so a couple of things. I did want to ask you, so you had mentioned that money is like fiat currency. So I know that we were taken off the gold standard. Now, if money is not actually backed by anything, I know you said that it was mostly based on faith in the government, but if money's not actually backed on by anything, does printing it out even really mean anything? I mean, China sort of manipulates its currency.
China does manipulate their currency completely using a fixed peg method,
Okay.
and I think we're about to experience the limit to that.
Okay.
In basic economic 101 theory, you can't just print to infinity. I think over the last 10 years, we've seen people print a lot of money, and it's been okay, as you can see in a lot of the graphs. But now we're seeing a dramatic rise in M1 and M2 because of a lot of it's a response to coronavirus, or I don't know if I can say that on here, response to the current situation that's going on.
Yeah.
There was a lot of predictions in March last year that we were going to see a recession, and that led to the Federal Reserve going in and overcooking the economy, printing too much, giving out lots of stimuluses to banks, not so much the American people, but definitely the banks. And in doing so, I believe that they overdid it. I think they overcooked the economy, and we are seeing a like cow-shaped rebound where people who are very wealthy are basically coming out of this pandemic a-okay, but a lot of Americans in the bottom 20% in particular were hugely adversely negatively affected by the
Okay.
economic output.
The other question I wanted to ask, so there was a lot of panic with regards to inflation when they started giving out the stimulus checks to the American people. Does that have as big of an effect as on M1 as well, or is it mostly just the money that they've been giving to the banks?
No, it's so little in comparison. It's mostly just to the banks. And a lot of it's
Okay.
that sneakiness that you're seeing. So the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics on Friday was supposed to release their PPI Index Report, which is Producer Price Index, which is a basket of goods and services of like standardized to track what people are paying for, like milk and eggs, or I guess that's not really good because those are fixed prices, but different goods that are consistent throughout people's spend throughout different generations and showing the discrepancy in that price. Their
Right.
website glitched on Friday, delaying the response for them. And when it came out, it was double what they expected. It was a 1% increase, which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but annualized, that's only in a 1 month period. Over an annual period, that would be 12% annually, right?
Yeah,
So
that's insane inflation.
it's
It's,
insane. Like 12% inflation is what they're thinking, right?
yeah.
So again, that's another example of them hiding these numbers. So I have a screenshot on that U.S. inflation data. They didn't want to say it's the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Okay. Now, okay, so and that's a real big problem because as you had mentioned, like inflation really is supposed to be only at 2%. Um, now, Now, you and I had talked about very briefly like hyperinflation. So, at what point does it reach hyperinflation? Is that when, like, around when it hits the 12%, or is that like would it hit an even higher number?
Yeah. So to explain that a little bit, the Federal Reserve has three main tools. They can. This is like a little basic economics 101. So it's change the reserve requirement. And that means they can tell private banks, the Federal Reserve can tell other banks that you have your money saved at, how much money they can keep on that they have, they're mandatory, they're required to keep in their vaults at all times.
Right,
They can change the discount rate or the discount window, so that's when they give loans to other banks, they have a lower price. The
right,
other thing is open market operations, and this comes into play. So because they overcooked, and I believe that they overcooked the economy as a huge overcorrection to March of 2020, the Federal Reserve basically has two options now because, as everyone knows, interest rates are an all-time low. Everyone is trying to buy a house, get a loan right now because interest rates are super low. So
right,
they can either raise interest rates, which will tank the economy. The economy is right now basically growing and because of tech stocks. And
right.
getting a little technical here, so I
No,
definitely
it's
need
okay.
to kind of tease this out. And the other thing that they can do is continue to print money and flood the economy with more fiat currency. But that would lead to what you're saying, Aiden, which is you risk the possibility of hyperinflation.
Okay.
So because they've historically interest rates are around 12 to 14%, and when you drop them down to where they are 1-2%, and even places like Japan and Europe, you're seeing negative interest rates for the bank has to pay you to take a loan, right? It's totally crazy. That
Yeah.
removes one of the Federal Reserve's tools for adjusting. The idea of the Federal Reserve is that when the economy starts to slow down, there's ways they can stimulate it. They can decrease the interest rate, which in turn leads people to start buying and building houses. And when people build houses, then they go to Home Depot and they spend a bunch of money, and they go to Crate and Barrel and they get decorations, and that
Right.
drives the economy back up. But
But
when you
isn't
drop,
that, sorry to pause you, but isn't that how subprime mortgage loans started coming into play because they wanted more lower income people to be able to purchase homes for that very
yeah,
reason?
path to hell is paved with good intentions. With
Okay,
anything,
fair.
yes, to an extent.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
And we've been going off the past 9.5, almost 10 years with these very dropping the interest rates lower and lower and lower and lower. And eventually, when you come to a crisis, they won't have any way to correct and fix it. We'll just have to, or it will, the economy will do what it will correct itself and go back to that 12% interest rate, which would be really devastating to anyone who has an adjustable mortgage right now.
Okay, which basically means that their mortgage rates will balloon out to a 12% interest because it goes based on what the banks are doing, correct?
Yeah. And I would predict, based off the 1.2 million Americans who, for the past year, have deferred paying their mortgage payments, that even a 1% increase in interest rates would have a devastating effect. We would feel it throughout the entire economy.
Right, and I just wanted to plug Jimmy Dore's show because he's one of the only people who have been talking about this because he had pointed out that they did this in 2008 as well, where they basically were allowed people to defer their mortgage payments and then people defaulted on their mortgages because it all came out at once, and then banks were able to go out and buy up those homes.
Exactly. My guess is they're going to do a mix of both. That's what we're already seeing. They're going to do a mix of continuing to print, risking hyperinflation, and they're going to continue, and then they will raise interest rates. And Jerome Powell, in that video I have linked for you at let's see what minute was it? It was like 33:51. It's an interview. It's a long interview.
Yeah.
And it's Jerome Powell, who's in charge of the Federal Reserve right now. And he goes out there and he says, in this period, we are expecting to see a significant, and he cuts himself off, temporary hike in interest rates. So you don't even have to take it from me. Jerome Powell himself is saying this. Now, in this whole video, he kind of downplays it as they're expecting to see temporary spikes in hyperinflation and in so the prices of goods will go up really high. That has never happened before in the history of economics. So it will be really interesting to see if his prediction is correct or if hyperinflation will stick true to what it is and you'll see just a
Right.
massive spike.
Okay, so and Willa, our wonderful producer, will you go ahead and put up that clip that Ginny was talking about?
Will show temporarily higher prices, but not persistent inflation.
What would you do? You would raise.
Yeah, that's not good. Yeah, I mean, midway through Signip, that's
Signif.
not.
And then
Yeah.
you keep playing, so he can't say the word that he's going to raise interest rates. So the next question she asked, she's like, "Are you going to raise interest rates?" And he's like, "That is one of our tools that we will employ if we need to."
So that's a yes.
That's a yes. So I say all this. I don't mean to be a doomsayer, but all of the indicators of an economic collapse and a housing market collapse are on red alert, and no one is talking about it.
No, you had mentioned that tech stocks are kind of propping up the economy right now, though. Is that not sustainable? I mean, like we're watching Google integrate itself more and more into the government and things like that. So, I mean, surely like their stock prices are only going to continue increasing. And then you look at things like Tesla.
I hate to say it because I'm a consultant, but it yes and no. It depends. It is not sustainable right now but it will over the long term be sustainable.
Okay.
Because technology drives innovation, and so it will, like, having investments in different stocks like Tesla is good for your portfolio, of course. I would just be aware that I think you're going to see a dip, and a lot of people like to buy the dips, right? Buy low, sell
Right.
high, not a problem. But tech stocks are completely correlated 1-to-1 with interest rates. As interest rates go down, tech stocks go up, because when they have to pay back dividends, they don't have to pay back as much, and they just love it. So they don't have as much money on hand in cash.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And then I wanted to ask too, so with the coming economic collapse, I mean, I know Daniel and I don't own anything. Daniel owns this truck. But like that's not going to be so an economic collapse, how much is that really going to affect people like me and Daniel? Like Daniel's a college student and I'm like a stupid cook. So like
Yeah, actually, I don't think it will as much, because I think you're in that nexus where you've weathered so much. It's almost like, this is a weird example, but when you think of kids in third world countries, right? There's no autoimmune disease, right?
right.
And there is higher child mortality, but once you make it out of childhood, your chances of dying of some random disease are pretty slim. It's, the
Okay.
strongest survive. So really the people who are going to be at risk is anyone who's making the same mistakes that they played in 08, which is having that adjustable interest rate on your mortgage. And they do that because people don't have to put as much down. I definitely want to talk about the housing bubble too, but the last graph I want to show, and this is the most damning evidence of a economic collapse, is margin debt. Margin debt is when, that's from FINRA. That's just another talking about the PPI increasing 1.7%.
Yeah.
Again, um, and I think that Reuters article talked about how it's really producers who are taking the burden of increased prices, but we all know whenever manufacturers see increased rates, they're just going to pass that back on to you and the consumer pretty
Right.
quickly. So margin debt, which is that FINRA graph, is in the stock market when you basically borrow to buy a stock, you borrow it on margin. Anyway, it's kind of an interesting graphic because it is the predictor of an economic collapse. And if you zoom in, so blue is GDP, or the blue is S&P 500, and red is margin debt. And whenever margin debt hits a peak, you see a collapse, and it's peaking, and no one's talking about it. It's like one of those.
Okay.
It's like one of those things that, like, like the best predictor of like the presidential election is like the October face mask, like for Halloween. It's like
Right.
always accurately predicted who's going to be the president. FINRA in margin debt is one of the most accurate predictors of an economic collapse. And if you zoom in, you can see we just peaked. Another thing on that, so you see in 2008, it was around, I can't see the left, but it doubled. Our margin, the amount of people borrowing debt to buy stocks basically is double what it was in 08. So it really will end up being the mother of all bust, I believe.
Right. Well, fuck.
To answer one of your questions earlier about, like, does the stimulus check lead to inflation? No, but I do think the Biden's proposed $2 to $4 trillion infrastructure package, that would again increase inflation and lead us down the road of hyperinflation, which is why I believe it's going to be a mix. I think they're going to raise interest rates about 1% to 3%, and I believe we're going to experience some hyperinflation. Jerome Powell thinks we're just going to experience temporary spikes in hyperinflation. Like some weeks your gas will be like $10, and some days it won't. I don't think that will happen, because I think once people see a huge rise in prices, there's going to be a run on the bank.
Right. Which, just to throw out there, is what George W. Bush was trying to avoid with the first bailout in 2007, I believe it was, when the economy started to collapse while he was still president.
Yeah.
Which is what made that first bailout so important, but the other two were not as helpful, and that's why you didn't see as big of a cushion when the collapse happened.
But because interest rates are so low now, they can't go any lower, right?
Right.
We've handicapped the Federal Reserve, and maybe this is a good thing. And that's a different argument, whether or not to have the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, and I think that weren't they doing, they dropped that interest rate just in case the economy collapsed during the whole like when everyone was in quarantine and stuff, right?
Exactly. Now they can't go lower.
Right.
So one of those three tools I talked about is now removed, and this further aggravates the fact that when the Federal Reserve goes this low and overcorrects and overcooks the economy, it debilitates them from doing their actual job, which is in the case of an actual recession, which we didn't see in March 2020, but we will potentially, I believe we will see in May 2021. I don't believe they'll be able to properly address it the way that they are chartered to be able to.
Right. And I did want to touch on, because under the so in around right before the 2012 elections, I think it was in 2010 when the Tea Party movement started to sort of come about, they had mentioned, specifically Ron Paul had talked about going back on the gold standard. Now, do you think that that is still, like, do you think that that could be a viable solution in order to provide more accountability to the Fed, or like, what do you think? Or like just more backing behind our currency to make it less of a nightmare?
I think what they're going to do, Jerome Powell's already talking about a digital currency that happened today. I think they're going to move to a digital currency system.
I hope it's Dogecoin.
Which will be a perfect transition into episode 2, crypto.
Yeah. Tune in next week when we bring Jinny back to terrify us about cryptocurrencies.
So I tell you to invest in pirate coin.
Right. And actually, investments, I did want to talk about that too, because like, so assuming that there is an opportunity to buy the dip, like, what would you suggest for people our age or for people who have like lower incomes to potentially start investing in? Because with apps buy the dip, so are there specific types of stocks and stuff that you would suggest?
Absolutely. I really like these like smaller index funds. You can find them where they have like 5 or 6 different companies in them. I don't really recommend the and this is coming from my father's a financial planner, so I hear a lot. My husband's working in financial planning now, so I hear about finance stuff all day long. I'm not a financial planner, so this is not financial advice.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna give you what I know.
You seem like you are fairly more knowledgeable than I am,
Yeah.
Or not to keep bagging on Daniel, but
I think it's because the
I'm
SEC
assuming
can sue
Daniel
you
will.
for that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, like they did during the GME thing, and I don't want to be sued by the SEC, so it's just not financial.
Yeah, none of us are experts. We're all morons. We're all drinking alcohol. This is just like, this is a podcast about me asking my other friends what I should be doing in a panic. It is not in any capacity. We are not fiduciaries. Like,
yeah. So the big public service announcements: if you have a mortgage, make sure it's a fixed rate. If buy the dips are great, and the best way to do investments is to a little bit more aggressively is just to buy the top 10 stocks on the S&P 500 list, or you can buy little index funds like ETFs, electronically traded funds, which have maybe Tesla and Google and Robo and like a couple other companies in that mix. To kind of, you get all the growth, but it's not as volatile as buying a single stock, because I know that can be scary to a lot of people. I don't really recommend buying the whole S&P 500 index fund. People talk about that at work for me all the time. They're like, you should just buy that. You don't have to, it's so relaxed. You don't ever have to look at it. The thing is, it's like taking a net and going through the entire Gulf coast of Texas. Like you're getting dolphins, you're getting red snapper, you're getting turtles and clam. I mean, you just pull everything. And
yeah.
what I mean by that is you're pulling the top 10 companies, you have a little bit of that, but you also have the lowest performing companies. You have 500 companies in that mix that are dragging your growth down. So trying to, and people are like, well, what if those companies change, the top 10 companies? Then you can just sell those stocks. It's
Right.
a little bit more like active, proactive in your investment portfolio, but not that much. The top 10 companies really don't change. They change about every 5 to 7 years. So you don't have to be too concerned.
Right. Just as a side note for our listeners out there, like, if you're on the younger side of millennials, it is a good time to start investing. It's a good time to start investing in your retirement. Like, you really do want to start thinking about these things now. But again, I'm a moron cook, so financial advice is not guaranteed or solid.
Sorry. Make sure it's a Roth. Make sure whatever, if your 401k or your Roth IRA or your IRA, put it in a Roth format. That means you pay taxes today, but you don't pay taxes later when you're at a higher tax bracket. So it's like paying taxes on the, if you're going to like the feed store and you're buying apple seeds, you're paying taxes on a lighter amount of goods, the apple seeds, instead of paying taxes later on a really heavy, juicy apple.
Right. Which makes sense. And then, sorry, Daniel, I had you mute yourself. If you have any other questions, like, just tell me to shut the fuck up.
No, you're all good. I've just been listening. I know nothing about like the economy or anything like that. So I've just been like taking notes. Now I'm gonna have to go look into the small index funds and figure all that out. I'm
Right.
definitely not looking forward to this collapse, but I'm glad to hear that it won't affect me because I have nothing except my truck, which is also on the verge of collapse any day. So
My only concern with I believe it's going to be called the mother of all busts. I think this will trump '08. I think it will
Okay.
even trump the '30s. My concern is how much it takes down with it. Because we saw in '08 the housing bubble was able to collapse the whole global economy. And I believe that if we see even a 1% increase in interest rates, and in that video, you can see like the next clip, like minute 34, she asks Jerome Powell, are you going to raise interest rates? And he's like, he can't say the word, yes, I'm going to raise interest rates. He's like, yes, that's the tool we will use if inflation goes past 2%, which I would say it's past 2%.
Yeah.
At this point. And if we see interest rates rise even 1 to 3%, the housing market will collapse on itself. And let's go into the housing market because that's been really interesting. I know we were talking before about different homes in our areas going for millions of dollars with just, it's
Right.
really mind-boggling. A lot of what's going on behind that. I don't know if you're living in these big areas like Austin, or Houston, or Nashville, where you're seeing people buy houses unseen 20 to 30% over asking price in cash. That is Wall Street. In 2017, they passed a couple of laws allowing Wall Street firms to get involved in buying housing. I personally think this is illegal. It should be illegal. But I won't
Right.
get into politics here too much. Uh, but they were allowed to start buying real estate. You're seeing a lot of these really harsh renters who are like, if you're a day late, they kick you out. A lot of them are Wall Street firms running it behind the scenes, buying cash and giving the return on the ROI, the return on investment to their investors, right? And like Aiden alluded to, this is really sounding similar, not quite exactly the same as the '08 subprime mortgage crisis, but history doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes. It's sounding very similar where you have these big banks coming in and driving up the prices of housing. And now we're seeing housing prices are at 9 to 10% inflated. So if you
Right.
bought a house in the past year, it's this could be a really huge problem if we see hyperinflation. People can't make their end meet. It's gonna be.
Well, Daniel knows someone who had an undeveloped piece of land, continued to be undeveloped, and just sold it for a lot more money than they bought it um, for their
Mhm.
move to California. And Daniel, that it's out in the middle of nowhere, right? It's in like Kyle, Texas, which is bumfuck nowhere.
No, it's not in Kyle, Texas. It's in Blanco, Texas, White, Texas, um, and
But
it's in like this little developed neighborhood. But the crazy thing is like Aiden said, it's an undeveloped piece of land. They put it on the market on a Monday. On Saturday, they sold it for a 70% income, like immediately. And then I even have another example. The neighbors across from my dad's house, they put their house on the market on a Friday. On Saturday, they had 24 offers. On Sunday, they sold. Like,
it's
quick turnaround.
insane.
Yeah.
Supply is at an all-time low, and now because Wall Street drove up the prices and interest rates are at an all-time low, a lot of mom and pops have FOMO, and they want to buy now. They want to sell now would be a good thing.
Can you explain FOMO real quick?
Fear of missing out.
Okay, gotcha.
Aiden's an old man.
Yes.
So
Hey,
a
you
lot
didn't know NIMBY the other day, not in my backyard.
of FOMO is fear of missing out, and when Wall Street in the past couple of years have been driving up prices, a lot of just your average buyers have been going in and putting 5% down, which is rarely supporting. They're not putting a lot of money down. They're buying, and because interest rates are so low, whenever interest rates decrease, the prices of houses go up
Right.
because people can then buy more, which is will end up being out of their budget as time progresses. It's playing with fire, and I'm very concerned about all of it. And we have a lot of these young people or mom and pops going and buying houses that are 10, 20, 30% overpriced at really low interest rates, but they're not fixed interest rates, they're adjustable. It'll lead to another 2008 housing crisis, I believe. And I believe the indicators are like, it's not just me pulling this out of my ass. Like these are the indicators.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it makes sense. Like, I mean, you could even look at just at rental prices, and because I'm in Portland, Maine, and I mean, the rental prices here for shithole apartments, I mean, are exorbitant. I mean, we're talking like $1,800 for a one-bedroom apartment, which in some big cities is not that much, but we're talking about like a city the size of Pearland, Texas, with, I mean, a fuckload of homeless people and a lot of problems. And yes, it's really pretty, but is it $1,800 a month for a studio or a one-bedroom apartment pretty? No. Nowhere is. I mean, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
That's why I think they're lying. And I think that's why they're hiding a lot of these indicators. I think that's why the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics isn't releasing their data. I think that's why they're discontinuing M1 and M2 on a weekly basis, because I believe that inflation is not at 2%, and it hasn't been for a really long time, and that's catching up to us now, and we're going to end up paying the price for it. I think inflation is way, way higher, and I think we'll find out in the coming years when they do an autopsy of what happened. We'll see inflation was actually much higher than what they were saying it was.
I wonder if this will increase the home. Oh, I'm sorry, Daniel, go.
Well, I was gonna say, like, do you have, like, if you were gonna say inflation was somewhere, where would you put it? If it's higher than 2%.
I don't know. I'm not sure how the calculation would. I would honestly peg it around maybe 7%. Because when you look back to even the 90s for our parents' generation, you're seeing prices. Income hasn't changed. I think that's a really good indicator of what's going on with inflation, is that prices or wage prices have not increased at all and kept up, but goods and services are being a lot of them are being artificially kept down by the government, but it's going to catch up really quickly. I mean, you can only subsidize for so long. And that's the idea behind a subsidy. It's supposed to be temporary. You can't have a forever subsidy.
Right. Okay, so I know that this is sort of out of left field, but like, do you think that what are your thoughts on like a UBI sort of situation? Like, do you think that that would cause even more inflation, or do you think that that could actually sort of assuage some of the issues that are going on right now?
I think this would be the catalyst for implementing the UBI.
Okay. And do you see
people to be on the UBI? Sorry.
You do think it would be?
I think they want people to be on the UBI. Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. I thought you said it would be wonderful. Okay. I was like, well, this is a departure from what we potentially had talked about in the past. So, because my next question was like, do you think that that's a good solution?
I don't. Aiden and I disagree on this, but that's okay. I think a UBI is dangerous because effectively you are an employee of the government, and as such, they can ask you to do certain things and meet certain requirements. And I think that undermines liberty.
Yeah, I could totally see it. My thoughts on that are like, well, theoretically, the government is supposed to be us. We're supposed to be a government of the people, by the people, for the people. So in all theory, it should be a good thing. But I suppose, as we've seen with like, all kinds of fun government surveillance things and the aforementioned three-lettered fucking whatever they're called. Yeah, words and phrases. Thank you, Jameson, for providing me with this intelligence. But I don't know. I think like if things were working as they theoretically should, a UBI is a good idea. But like most things, and nothing is working as it should. So it's probably just dog shit, like everything else that the government does.
Honestly, I think the UBI rolling out Q3 Canada, Mexico, and Q4 later this year. Yes. That's gonna be my hot predictions. I think
Andrew Yang's gonna commit seppuku over it. So you fucking bastards could have just put me in as president, but instead you put in Joe Biden bot.
I know, we like one of those like Reddit like remind me bots. So later this summer Q3 or
Yeah.
remind me of my predictions. So predictions the next month or so, mother of all busts.
So prediction: UBI Canada and Mexico Q3, and then US Q4.
Yep.
Yeah, Q3 or Q4. Yep, that's my prediction.
Okay. And Andrew Yang will be busy as mayor of New York City, so he won't have time for committing seppuku.
Oh, for fuck's sake. The last thing that New York City needs is another inexperienced moron running the place. I mean, who's the fucking mayor right now? Bloomberg?
Governor Meatball.
Not Bloomberg. Who's that other clown?
Cuomo.
Fuck. No, Cuomo's the governor. That fucking moron. No, he's the guy who was like, he was on stage, him and his wife, during the protests, singing like, "Power to the people."
I think it's
Who was that? Was it Bloomberg?
It's Bloomberg, yeah.
Who was the guy who ran? Okay, fair enough. Either way. Sorry? And then who was the guy who put in the $1 billion or whatever, trying to run for president for the Democrats?
Oh no, it's not Bloomberg, is it? It's
No, it's that other
de
goon.
Blasio.
Yes, because he had that video with like the
Blasio.
dancers. Yeah.
With the wife who's a lesbian and
Yes.
everyone's
God,
like,
she's-
"Why is she with you?"
Yeah, I mean, anyone with fucking what's his name? Why are you with him? Like, he's such a de Blasio. He's such a moron. It's like Gavin Newsom, like these effete wine merchant fucking morons. I don't know. Nancy Pelosi relatives.
Yeah, did you see Nancy Pelosi's husband is buying a bunch of stock in Microsoft before all these announcements? Instead trading.
I just don't. Okay, so like at the beginning of the year when the quarantine first started, and all those senators made a fuckload of money before they even implemented anything off of stocks. Like, how is that legal at all? Because they were buying and selling
Kelly
medical
Laffer.
stocks.
Laffer, whatever her name is. Her husband is the chair of the New York Stock Exchange, which should on its own be illegal.
Yeah, how? Yeah, you should not be allowed to work in government if that's the case. I think you probably have, like, I don't know, what is the word?
There might be a conflict of interest.
That's the word.
Maybe.
Just a slight. They're only supposed to regulate those people. It doesn't make any difference.
It's not insider trading if you tell your husband and then he does it.
Yeah, this is like when fucking Colbert started his super PAC and then got to sign it over to Jon Stewart, who technically had no connection to Stephen Colbert, even though they're friends and have shows that Jon Stewart produces. Like, no connection at all. Yeah, they're not.
I will never run Aiden Super PAC. I will never, ever, ever.
Yeah, when I run for president, me and Caitlyn Jenner are running together.
Exactly.
I'm running as the transgender Candace Owens.
I thought we were starting a super PAC against Caitlyn Jenner. I thought that's what we were doing, not with her.
It depends on how her election as governor goes. But yes, I am correct. My first mission, if Caitlyn Jenner announces her run for governor, is we will all be moving to California, Jinny included. She's not into this, but it's not a choice. And we're all moving to California so we can start LGBT people and allies against Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, wait, I was gonna say, Daniel, you know who's moving to California? I feel like everyone is fleeing California. I'm like, last one out, turn the lights off.
Yeah. Which will make the housing prices cheaper when we go there, specifically and solely for the purpose of stopping Caitlyn Jenner from being in public office.
All right, so when the entire economy collapses next month, we're moving to California.
Correct.
The gold rush, the next gold rush.
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
Yes. Dogecoin.
Dogecoin.
Pirate chain.
Monero.
Yeah. Pick your favorite cryptocurrency at this point. I love that people are fleeing regular currency so much that they're like, fuck it, I'm making my own.
I think it's very apropos to our whole conversation. I think you see a lot of people not having their faith at all in our fiat currency. You're even seeing this now. Major companies, you'll see a lot of them saying like, we should have 10% of our cash flow in crypto, which is crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. Will that drive Bitcoin up over 1 million?
Bitcoin's going to hit 400,000.
How much do you regret those lattes when you think about how much Bitcoin is? Folks, if you don't know, Jinny in high school set up a bunch of her dad's computers to mine for Bitcoin, and then spent it all on whipped cream. And
Ice caramel macchiatos, they were not worth it.
no, she could be a millionaire, and she's gonna be supporting me in a couple of years. So
Second prediction. Bitcoin's going to hit $400,000, then it will crash and everyone will move over to Monero and Pirate Chain.
one can only hope.
That's like 10 years out, Willa. So
Right.
we'll have the bot remind me. 10 years.
Oh my god.
You'll get that reminder as you're wandering the wasteland.
Like fighting off zombies.
You'll get like a buzz on a dying phone that's like, you are right. Bitcoin's worth nothing now. And then the phone explodes in your hand.
Actually, like shedding through the wilderness.
Right. There will be no wilderness. It'll only be desert. Your dream to live in Reno will be achieved because the entire country will be a desert.
It'll be very Mad Max.
Right. I, for one, look forward to it, and I'm planning out my asymmetrical haircut as we speak.
At the end of this video game, I'm hitting it 5 stars. 5 stars. This is fantastic.
Right. They need to make the simulation better, though. I'll totally buy into the whole Matrix theory, but make the simulation good.
I just, on the topic of the Matrix, totally different than, economic collapse. But I hated in the Matrix when they were like, we made it perfect. And humans just didn't like that. Like, no, fuck that shit. Make this simulation perfect. I want to wake up in a mansion and be able to do whatever the fuck I want. I would not like that.
Yeah, use me as a battery all you want, you bastards. Make it comfortable. Oh my god. So, alright. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about. Okay, so this is a side note, but do you think that something should be done to force Elon Musk to stop using Twitter, since every time he tweets something, Tesla's stock prices either shoot through the fucking roof or they collapse? Like, what is this the only person who actually should be regulated off of Twitter, or like?
Daddy Elon. I don't know.
Fair.
Kink shamed immediately.
Also, like, I made a little bit of money off of GME when he said.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
fair.
I can't be too bad, but yeah.
Ginny, were you the mastermind behind GME? Are you
I was
secretly?
not the mastermind behind GME. I cannot take credit for that one. That
Yeah.
was all our Lord and Savior, Roaring Kitty. So, or I guess it's deep fucking value. It was his
Yeah. Shout out to Reddit, by
Shout out
the way.
It was not a cat.
Oh my god. Let's see. Daniel, did you have any questions? Any thoughts?
I've been sharing my thoughts as they come. As you know, like politics and economy, I get all my information from Aiden. Aiden tells me who to vote for. That's basically
This is not a good system.
Okay, well, I can't trust the news. Who am I supposed to trust?
Aiden.
Yes.
I am Larry King, damn it.
Absolutely. Before, let's see. Yeah. I remember, I don't know what year this was, but you guys will know because you know a lot more about politics. But somebody asked me, like, who do you support, Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders? And I was like, give me a second. And I called Aiden and I was like, Aiden, who do we like?
You specifically said, who are we voting for?
I love it. I love it.
And it was like, this is some form of voter fraud where I'm just like making the decisions for you and also for me. Like, Daniel, we're socialists, damn it.
Yes, I know that now.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's not great, but it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, Aiden mainstream, so he can convince other voters.
Yeah, I'd be like,
Nepotism.
in the immortal words of Tim Dillon, I don't need sources.
I don't need sources. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that guy's fucking great.
On this podcast, anybody who talks is basically the Pope. If it comes out of your mouth, it is ordained by God.
Otherwise, be smited down. I agree with that.
Right?
Absolutely.
So Jenny, do you or do you not believe that we should guillotine billionaires? And feel free to
can't-
not answer that question.
I defer my answer.
That's word.
I'm just saying, if there was depopulation, I think it should start from the top down. Leadership, and then
Yeah.
depopulate, and then we'll let them know how it went.
And this is a comedy podcast. We're joking.
All jokes. All jokes.
Nothing but comedy.
I mean, I will say, if they wanted to, like, free up some funds, killing off the rich, you don't need to print more
we
money.
can't say any of this. We're gonna get kicked off YouTube. We can't get kicked off YouTube episode 1.
It's a joke. I'm joking. I would never seriously murder a billionaire.
They're all too busy doing Franklin scandal things. So
I mean, you know what? If billionaires can murder people, let's bring murder to the working class. Let's make it accessible to everybody.
okay, but Houston is doing that well on its own. Have you guys been watching the Houston murder rates? Jesus Christ. It's like 90s New York City. Like, they found it in Hitchcock, Texas. They found like a random dead teenager in a park. It's like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, there was someone who washed ashore over here in over near Galsonish.
Jesus Christ.
Hilton.
It doesn't make any fucking sense. I don't know. Yeah, and then the Houston mayor had to like release a warning or some shit. Did you guys see this about like just assume everyone in their car has a gun because people are like blowing each other's heads off on the highway? Like just
Okay, to be fair though, if you live in Texas and you're not assuming everybody is armed, like you're a little bit behind the times.
I mean, fair.
When my parents moved to Texas, or my mom's from Texas, when my dad's from New York, and my mom had to he would like yell at people in the car, cutting him off, like scream out like New York style, just, like flicking them off, screaming at them. And my mom's like, "You're going to get yourself killed. Like you're."
I know when I moved to the East Coast, I don't know why. I mean, I guess like that's why road rage is such a thing out here because there's no sense of danger. No one's gonna like ram their giant monster truck up your fucking ass for screaming at them. But here, like people fling themselves out of their vehicles to yell at you. I've seen people like pull their whole body out of the window to like look behind them and scream at somebody. Like,
I've done the phone with you, Aiden, and you scream at people.
I do scream at people.
Yes,
especially
Aiden
those people in
does.
the parking lot. Yes, I really do. The other day, I screamed at this couple in a parking lot because they were walking diagonally through the goddamn Walmart parking lot, which is absurd already. They're walking diagonally through the fucking Walmart parking lot, just strolling right along, having a fucking conversation, as if they're not walking through a populated fucking parking lot. Do that on the side. There's the fucking sides of the parking lot where there's no one parked. But no, they're going right through the populated, just diagonally across the fucking parking lot. So I rolled down my window and I was like, you fucking pieces of shit. What are you doing? Just fucking walk. And I just absolutely went apeshit to the point where I was like, you turn around and look at me because they just kept walking to the abandoned Verizon or whatever. Who even knows if it's fucking abandoned? I know, I'm gonna get attacked. But like...
But you're not in Texas, so you won't get shot.
Right? Only Maine. Sorry, I gotta plug in my laptop.
The whole setup collapses.
That's life, isn't it?
Alright guys, I probably have to go make dinner soon. Any last questions before the farewells?
No, I think that was a good interview. Was there anything you wanted to say before we hop off? Or before you hop off?
Just thank you. This is so much fun. If we want to talk later about crypto, I'm all yours.
Yes, you definitely should be on the podcast more.
Wait, one last thing, because we haven't done it. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking red box wine. It's a Chianti.
Fair. Daniel, what about you?
I am being really classy, and I'm drinking Fireball whiskey. I don't know if I can say Fireball, but cinnamon-flavored whiskey out of my teacher's gift mug that I got when I was a pre-K teacher.
I love it. It's really cute.
Yeah. And I'm drinking Jameson out of a 50-cent Walmart plastic tumbler. So here we are.
Was it Hannibal Lecter who was like, Chianti tastes best with eating people? Like, what was that? What's the quote? I don't know.
Oh God, I don't even know. Jesus Christ.
Well, if we eat the rich, we'll get to test that out.
Jinny's one of the Epstein people uncovered. You heard it here, folks.
Chrome.
Right? It's Jinny and Chrissy Teigen.
And Oprah.
And Oprah. Definitely
They all
Oprah.
hang out together. And the
Right.
Rothschilds.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All of the fun cancelable things. All right. Well, Jinny, it's been good to have you on. Thank you so much. I'll let you know when this gets published. Yeah.
Thank you, Bella. So much fun.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you later. Cheers.
Peace out.